Hello, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today for the webinar on our reclaimed water treatment system. This is one of the two products that we launched towards the end of 2022, something we're very excited about. I know some of you may have had the chance to see it at the Northeast Regional Car Wash Convention last September or at the SCWA Expo just a couple weeks ago in Texas. This webinar really was going to serve as an overview of the system and some of the thinking behind the development and the challenges that really went into in the challenges that people have been experiencing with existing reclaim systems that we're really trying to address with this system. We will be recording today's webinar, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording in case any of our distribution partners are looking to share that with their customers or operators looking to share it with service technicians, however it may be, or if you have to skip out a little early. We will be sending out the recording, so we will have that available to you after the webinar today. We'll also be taking questions at the end of the webinar. Feel free to submit those questions at any point during the presentation. If there's something pertinent, something you don't want to forget, just go ahead and submit it, and we'll revisit those again at the end of the presentation once we're done with everything else. My name is Dan St. Jacques. I'm the marketing manager for innovateIT. I know some of you may have met me before. Some of you may be familiar with me. The real star of today's show, though, is a man with whom I'm sure many of you are familiar, and that is Shane Groff. So this time I'll turn it over to our Director of National Sales, Shane Groff. Shane, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Dan said, I'm Shane Groff. I'm Director of National Sales for innovateIT Car Wash Equipment, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this system. So without further ado, we'll just get started, dive right into it. So challenges with reclaim systems that we all face. We own and operate car washes, as many of you know, and these are the three challenges that each and every one of us in the car wash industry face when dealing with reclaim: the odor, water usage, and clogged nozzles. Water usage is why we all do reclaim, and then the odors and the clogged nozzles is the result when we do use it. The way we approached it and our solutions to these odors, we decided to do chemical dosing of the system versus commonly known like ozone, which is, somewhat dangerous and has a short shelf life, so to speak. So we worked with a local blender. We developed a non-hazardous chemical, which can be shipped via UPS if you'd happen to run out and you needed a 5-gallon pail shipped right away, could be shipped UPS. But it's user adjustable, which is really nice. So you can dial it in for your specific needs and cost per car. Our system, which you're later going to see, could be considered a lower volume reclaim system. What we found is you really don't need a ton of water. You need a specific amount of water that you're going to use in your tunnel. Anything over and above that, it is great. You can use it to wash the conveyor pit or conveyor belt rinse system and all that. But we really wanted to get to a point where we treat the water you're going to use in the tunnel and stop at that point. That way you can reduce big storage tanks, holding tanks in the back room, which always cause odor. You got floats that overflow and you come in, the tanks overflow. And so we wanted to avoid all that. And then that last item there with the clogged nozzles. As many of you know, visiting our website and touring our wash locations, we have a lot of nozzles, 140 high pressure nozzles in some of our washes using reclaim. So clogged nozzles is a huge maintenance item, and we needed to get the reclaim system to a point where we were not cleaning nozzles every hour of the day. It was just an unsustainable way to wash cars. Our car wash managers are really having a fit. So that third item, we wanted to get down below that 10 micron and just really concentrate on using that water to wash the cars versus doing maintenance on our equipment due to the water quality. So some of you may know, we like to install this equipment in our own washes and some select other beta washes. for our production run, we used a local wash right there in Colony. Again, they were unclogging the nozzles, every hour if they really could. We ran this unit for 81 days in that wash, and the manager did not clean nozzles for 81 days. We pulled the beta unit out and proceeded then to go into our main production design. So here's what the system looks like. We'll do a brief overview here. We've got a really good user interface there, touch screen on the front control panel where you can see everything the system's doing. Any messages or alerts that the system wants to notify you will be on that screen. And that is a screen that you would use to make site-specific adjustments. We have high-performance multimedia filters there on the right-hand side. Each one of those filter tanks will do 10 GPM. So currently we have 2 filter system and a 4 filter system. We're working on the 6. But our system, basically right now we have the standard flow, 20 gallons a minute is what's pictured here, and then up to our high flow, which is 40 gallons a minute. And again, those numbers quite a bit lower than what you typically hear about on trade show floors. Many people being like, oh, our system can do 100, 150 gallons a minute of reclaimed water. And we somewhat got trapped in that also and bought several of those systems and really realized that, let's just say 150 gallons a minute, and you're washing 3 minutes or 3 cars every minute. We weren't using 50 gallons of reclaim per car. We were using 10 to 15 gallons of high pressure reclaim per car. So that's how the math works out. But you can see there the different components on the systems, the dosing pump, the manifolds that we made, the stainless steel frame, the odor eliminator chemical. It's placed within that frame, so it's space saving there for you. And of course, like all our equipment has feet on it that are threaded, so you can adjust it for back rooms that have sloped floors or uneven floors. Another integral part of this whole system is our micro bubbler stand that get placed in tank 2, and we're using compressed air for this instead of a separate, 3 or 5 horse blower. We found through working on the beta units that you really don't need that big blower. You just need a small amount of air bubbling in that tank to increase your dissolved oxygen. This one, stainless steel frame, and those the air comes out from under those pans, creates a really nice aeration in the tank. You can hang it by chains or stainless steel cable, whatever your preference is, so you can easily pull it up out of your access manhole. It's quite simple. There's nothing exotic about it, but no maintenance required. The backbone of the system, every system has something that really separates it from other systems. I would say in our system, it's this Grundfos grinder pump. Many of the systems out there, we all know, have a pump in the back room. It has a strainer basket. You have to prime it. You got to clean the strainer basket constantly, and every time you clean it, then you got to prime the pump again. Something funny that we run into a lot, even at our own locations, is we go to pump out the sediment tanks outside. Truck comes, sucks it all out. Now the water level's below the inlet, and now you got to wash a bunch of cars and wait for, again, to prime that pump inside. This pump and system that we're utilizing here, this grinder pump from Grundfos, it is outside in your third tank. It's a grinder pump, so any kind of trash that's in that pump, it'll literally grind it up. There's no need for a strainer basket. There's no check valves. It's self-priming because it's submersible. It's really just a rock solid setup. You know, if there's water in a tank, you turn it on, it's going to run, it's going to pump water. Roughly speaking, rough numbers, 60 gallons a minute, about 50 psi. We developed a little stand there, as you can see, made out of stainless steel to hold the pump up off the floor of the tank in case you get sediment in your last tank. Many of us do, but this way it's up off the ground. And also the way the stand has been designed, it's when the pump's on, it does not create that vortex effect and suck right up off the floor of the tank directly under the pump. Because if you did have sediment in there, what would happen is, you know, the pump's going to draw that sediment in, and it just makes it a lot harder on your media filters. And again, as you can see there, no strainer basket, eliminating that daily maintenance. We're all here to wash cars, not clean strainer baskets every morning, or in some cases multiple times a day. Here's just a quick little video looking in the bottom of the grinder pump. You can see it's sucking things in that are buoyant in the water, rags, towels. That looks like a Swiffer pad or something. It'll just take it in, ingest it, grind it up, and keep on moving. Pretty slick little pump. Okay, now we'll get into some of the features. You know, we're really looking at, you know, treating that water to make that water as usable in your car wash as you can through the media filters. And just reiterating again, the grinder pumps replacing that pump in your equipment room that has a strainer basket, and the high efficiency multimedia filters. The design of the whole system is you can expand on it like the system pictured there, 2 tanks. If you decided to add another arch in your wash bay and you needed more reclaim, you can just stack 2 more tanks on it with the interconnecting hoses, and you'd be up and running. So here's a little bit of performance data for you. Again, our standard flow system, 2 tanks, roughly 20 gallons a minute, less than 10 microns, auto back flush. Same with the high flow. Your output is going to double. It's going to go to 40 GPM, again, less than 10 microns, and auto back flush features. Okay, so we'll get into how the system operates a little bit and production type items for you guys. I don't have to read all that for you. I'll let you look at that real quick. We'll breeze through the next slide. Okay, the dosing. This is an integral part of this unit, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So as this system is filtering water, as that water comes into our system, we're using a Grundfos dosing pump, injecting a little bit of that chemistry into that water flow. That water flow is going in through your media filters and out of the media filters into your wash system, so that oxygenating chemistry, which is preventing odor, is in the entire system from the time it enters your back room. Because as soon as your piping or hosing coming from your sediment tanks enters that back room and connects this manifold on our setup, that's where we're injecting this chemistry. So it's going through the multimedia filters. If you use your reclaim in a tank on a high pressure pump stand, for example, in your back room, we all know from years past that water sits there overnight. It begins to grow bacteria, begins to smell. You come in the next morning, you're like, whoa, you know, and you do your wet down. Maybe you run a couple cars, and then all that water that was in that high pressure holding tank has been used, and the smell subsides. With this chemistry that we've been using and developing, it's got a shelf life of roughly 18 hours. So, for example, just say you close 7, 8 o'clock at night and you open at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. It's 12 hours. you should not have that odor coming in the morning. So you don't have to go through that whole process. First few customers smelling all that. It's a pretty sweet little deal. For example, ozone has a shelf life of just a couple hours. The effects of the ozone generator on wastewater, 2 to 4 hours max. So that's why when you come in the morning, you smell that. Also, with this adjustable dosing, say it just flat out rains for 3-4 days and your car wash is closed. Obviously, you're past that, 16, 18-hour window of shelf life of the chemistry. You have the ability to come in the morning, hit a button on your user screen that says odor eliminator. It'll start the whole process and do a little extra dosing to help you out. So when your customers come in, you don't have that odor. All right, here's showing a little illustration of our multimedia filters, how they operate, some of the specs there, particles larger than 10 microns, and 60% of the particles larger than 3 microns. A lot of times, some of you operators might notice with your current reclaim systems, is there certain particles that you're not getting out. When you spin the water in a hydrocyclone, you get the really heavy, say like gravel or sediment that's in that water. It'll fly to the outside of the hydrocyclone, go back down your reject pipe. But there's a lot of buoyant particles that just don't come out. A lot of organic stuff that's lighter than water. That's where the multimedia filters come in, because it filters anything and everything that's, the sediment, in the fall time when you have leaves and grass on the road that often ends up clogging your nozzles. It's going through this multimedia filter and getting filtered out. The multimedia filters, they work on a pressure differential is one of the options, where you can set the system up to back flush these filters based on the differential between the inlet pressure and outlet pressure. You can also back flush it based on if you want it to hold off to the end of the day, which is nice. And that's all user adjustable. Here's some of the system components and connections. As you can see the framework, and there's two distinct manifolds on there. In the center of the screen is a real good view. The manifold on the right, you can see there's a coupling on the bottom. That's where your hose connection or pipe connection from your sediment tanks will come in. And then halfway up the manifold, you'll see a pipe connection. That's where it just bypass right back to tank. And then out the top is where it would go through the multimedia filters. After it comes back from the filters, it would come into the other manifold, and it has go to the wash process. And then there's also a port for your fresh water connection to back flush the filters when that time comes. So that covers the basic part of how our reclaim system works. Some general specs on it and all that. We're looking at complete solutions. So I'd be remiss to not mention maximizing the efficiency of your car wash water usage. When you combine our new on-demand RO system along with the reclaim system, you can really, again, maximize that efficiency, only treating and making the water that you're using, less storage tanks, smaller back rooms, ultimately in the end, reducing your cost per car, as you can see on this slide. We will be at the ICA show, booth 1272. We'll have all this equipment there for you to kick the tires, ask questions. Before we continue any further, does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask? You can type in the box.
We'll give you all just a few minutes to submit any questions you might have. I know it might take a few minutes to get them in here, but Again, if you don't have any questions, thanks again for joining today, and we'll just wait on and see what questions we get. Shane, I'll let you know once we get them in.
You know, as you guys are typing, can tell you a little bit about, you know, some of our testing. You know, the other day I did a tour and somebody asked about, well, what's the maintenance on those black filters? Do you have to dump them out? Do you have to, you know, what happens if they get plugged up? In one of our beta tests at one of our own washes, we literally plugged them like solid. There was hardly any water coming through them at all. We just went to the touch screen and back flushed them a couple times, and we were back at 100%. We've really strived to abuse this system really in the tests to predict what may happen and what it would take preventatively or you know, for lack of better terms, just maintenance wise, to put the system back at 100%. Again, we're really with all our equipment striving for robust equipment that does not require a lot of maintenance, because with memberships we're all washing a lot more cars and we can't be in the back room fixing this stuff every day. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for you.
Shane, we got one question for you. So where does the backwash get dumped?
The backwash, that would be your nastiest of all substances. And the best practice would be to dump it after your sediment tanks, before your oil water separator going to your sanitary system. Because if you reintroduce it back into your sediment tanks, you're just going to have to filter it again. So you really want to, it's the nastiest of all substances, is connected into your sanitary system after your sediment tanks.
Sorry, Shane, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
This question was about how many are currently installed in the field.
Oh, with our beta units, I would say we got six of them. And we have more that have already shipped that have not been started up. They're being installed at new washes, but the beta units have been installed for several years. You know, for us to fine tune the process and production design.
Next question, Shane. The cost for the odorizer and where that ships from, the chemicals itself.
Yes, it ships from our blender. It can be it'll be drop shipped. Use about 1 barrel a month, and the barrel's $22.99 a gallon. So it's not overly priced. It's a non-hazmat shipping, which is really key when it comes to chemistry. It'll be shipping out of Connecticut.
What size reclaimed tanks do you recommend, Shane?
Wow, someone's got a good one there. That's kind of a ambiguous question. And the bigger your sediment tanks are, the slower the water is going to flow and the more sediment's going to naturally and organically drop out. Myself personally, stage 1 and stage 2, I would never do anything less than 3,000 gallons. I'd say in a perfect world, you'd bounce between 3,000 and 5,000 gallons on stage 1 and 2. Stage 3, where commonly called the clarification tank in the industry, where you're drawing your water out of, could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000, maybe 2,500 gallons.
Should give another minute or two here to submit questions.
Yep.
We still have, that's the ones that we have in the queue right now. So just give another minute or two.
Yep. I tell you guys about the modes on this a little bit. Seems we have a little time here as people are typing. So as you're washing cars and needing water, obviously the water is coming in, going through the filter media, going to your car wash equipment. Say you have a car wash with a belt flush, or maybe not quite the best self-cleaning conveyor pit design. When it's not being used to wash a car, you can right above the drum, you can see there's a gold air-operated ASCO valve. You can open that valve and send that water right to your conveyor pit to wash down the pit. So your pump's running, you're moving that water, it's keeping it aerated, keeping the odors down. You can also go into where after it goes through the filter media, you could send that water to any location you wanted if you wanted to use filtered water to do those types of activities also.
Just gonna go in here. Do you foresee any issues with using above ground tanks?
The challenge, and I'm going to assume they mean above ground sediment tanks. I think any system that uses above ground sediment tanks is going to have a couple issues. One is almost always we see them, they're round tanks in the back room. They're very tall and not necessarily big diameter. So the water entering those tanks and going from tank to tank, again, tends to move very swiftly, which cuts down on your dropout time for those solids. I did a tractor trailer wash back 2000 that had 10 tanks. Each of them were 5,000 or 6,000 gallons. They're like 12 feet round, and the water moves so swiftly through those tanks that you get to the very last tank and there's still a ton of mud in it, which then creates a lot of maintenance and ongoing costs. So personally, if you're asking my opinion, I'd try to avoid it at all costs. But I also know we have a lot of old washes out there in the country where may not be allowed or have the room on the property to dig up and start putting, huge tanks in. So your hands are a little tied. But the most distance from inlet to outlet of the tank, the slower the water is going to move, and you're going to have the best dropout.
I know we touched on this one, Shane, earlier, but what's the gallons per minute of the two units and the size of the pump as well?
Okay, the pump maxes out. I just checked with the engineer earlier this week, or it was late last week. The pump's really going to max out at about 60 GPM. Each one of these black multimedia filters is doing 10 gallons a minute. So on the screen right now, that cart has 2 tanks, so it's doing 20 GPM. You add the second cart to it, it's doing 40 GPM of filtered water. And we're working towards getting hooking up one that has 3 carts to get 60 gallons a minute and max out that pump.
And can you use RO reject water with the system?
Yeah, our RO reject, generally speaking, is used somewhere in your wash process, whether it be undercarriage, wheel blasting. Some people use it on high pressure rinse or whatever. So that reject water is going into your whole processed gray water, which is going through the sediment tanks and being drawn back into the system. So that's not an issue.
And you just touched on what happens when the air bubblers are running. Do they foam up, or what's happening with them when they're actually in the process of running?
Yeah, so you can just picture a bucket of water or a pool or whatever. If you had a small hose that's bleeding air into the system under a dinner plate, it's just aerating the water to keep promoting the oxygenation, to keep that odor down, keep that water moving, the anionic, all that stuff. Or aerobic. I'm sorry, I said aerobic and non-aerobic.
You have one last minute here to get questions in, but that covers it so far, Shane. So we'll give you one last minute. If there are no further questions,
I would say anybody that's interested in it, and even if you're not interested in purchasing it, really come by our booth, talk to one of us, one of the innovative team members or one of the distributors working the booth, and learn about the system. And you'll really see how simple it is and user friendly it is. Those are some really key factors for you car wash operators. Is you don't want an engineer on staff to work on it. You really want it to be as user friendly as possible.
Well, nothing else has really come in here, so I think we're all set on this end. Again, thanks everybody for joining us today. We will get the recording out to you guys, so you'll have that available to you. So again, thanks for joining. Again, if you have any further questions, obviously, you can reach out to Shane, visit the website, and again, visit us at the Car Wash Show. We'll have this there for booth 1272. So again, thanks again for joining us today, guys, and we will see you later.